Our next featured event actually is a panel, and Chaitra Vedullapalli is going to be our moderator of the panel. So let's see. Now, you're going to have a panel about business model innovation, leading with authenticity. I can't wait. My dogs have started barking, so I'm getting off the stage and letting.
Thank you, Patty. So really appreciate it. Welcome back again. This again is going to be a fantastic session. So this one, this afternoon session is really for cloud founders so that we know that they are growing and they have time in the Friday afternoon. So that's why it's designed here. So before we invite all the speakers, I would like to kind of set the stage of what we will be talking about, right? The topic is around defining cloud business model innovation. And what does it mean in the $1 trillion market? What does that mean? How does that work? So we all know that the cloud computing is expected to grow more popular in the coming years. And you heard that for the last 3 days, and it's not going to change. The narrative is not changing. So, however, analysts expect that it's going to go from 445 billion in 2021 to 947 billion in 2026. Given that growth, there is an exciting opportunity for as-a-service models, which is the SaaS solution, the infrastructure as a solution, which is the as solution, and the platform as a service, which is a platform PaaS solution. So these things are going to pop up a lot. So the business ecosystem is in the midst of that paradigm shift, and the customers are increasingly prefer to pay for access rather than ownership of the software. So many of the industries are shifting from one-time sales model to the recurring revenue model, which allows the business to generate consistent revenue by providing ongoing access for their products and their subscription. So how many of you here today are entrepreneurs? Just put in +1 in the chat. With that, I'm going to invite Jeana Jorgenson. She joins from Google, and she's also going to be board of advisor coming in from next month. So welcome, Jeana. Very excited to have you. Marc Monday, let's have you too. I have worked with him at Microsoft and absolutely one of the smartest person I've met. So thank you, Marc, come on board. And then I have Stephen French. I just got to meet through Tucker, and oh my God, I was blown away with his, I would say, understanding in the life. So really, really honored to have you, Stephen, too. So welcome, all of you. So here is how I'm going to kickstart this conversation. I want all of you to introduce yourself, and I also want you to make what the 2022 prediction will look like for the tech industry. So I'll start with female first. Jeana, you will start first.
Well, thank you. Very, very kind of you. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeana Jorgenson, and I am a senior director at Google, working on the cloud business. I've been on the cloud business for about 20 years now. Previously, I was at Microsoft for about 19 years, working all different disciplines of the cloud. And what I do at Google now is I focus on sort of what we call the modern core platform, which is all the infrastructure modernization, app modernization for Google Cloud. And then I get to think across Google Cloud about sustainability, developer, and our marketplace services. What is my prediction? I think my number one prediction is probably pretty standard. I think one of the core things I feel like in the next year, maybe 2 years, there's going to be an inflection point where customers are no longer willing to pay for things that are difficult to do. We're still in this phase where it's really, really challenging to deploy certain solutions. We have sort of still very traditional enterprise software sales models in place. And my prediction is that there's going to be a force coming from customers that's going to say, I demand that things are more self-service. It's easier for me to buy things online. It's easier for me to deploy things online. It's easier for me to find things online. And being more direct and digital, we've said that for years and years and years, but I think we're going to come to a head at which customers are no longer willing to pay for doing things in a difficult manner. So
that's well said, Jeana. I would love that one because selling software will become so easy, like selling water or any other, easy consumer-based services. Marc, what about you? Tell us about yourself and tell us about the prediction you're going to make.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think this is the year more than ever where everything is going to happen. As Jeana said, it's about the customer, and the customer is going to expect a lot more than they ever have in the past. Business models will change, pricing models will change, licensing models will change. The requirements around simplicity, as Jeana pointed out, in UX will change. This is the year where it all comes together. I'm Marc Monday, and I lead the strategic partnerships here at Sage. And I guess my predictions kind of go along with that, which are things are going to go faster than they ever have. And so for those of us who are exhausted from COVID, buckle up. The change is going to go even faster. Consolidation will continue in many sectors. Back to Jeana's point around simplicity. I think ecosystems, even though many of us have been working in various ecosystems, will become the buzzword du jour as we try to stitch together all of this complexity and make it look and feel simple. Doesn't mean it'll be less complex under the covers, but it needs to look much less complex to the customer and to the user.
Thank you, Marc. Welcome. Stephen, please introduce yourself and tell us about your prediction.
Hi, Chai. Thank you so much. So I'm Stephen French. I've actually been in the biotech space for about 20 plus years, working on everything from cancer diagnostics to pharmaceutical side. So I have a very life sciences centric and focus. And when I'm thinking about what is going to happen in 2022, I definitely agree with Jeana and Marc on a couple of key points. And I'm actually seeing this happen real time in the biotech space over the last, even kind of 5-ish years. It just keeps getting faster, to Marc's point, that when you're looking at pharmaceutical development or as we've even heard in vaccine development, but I'm seeing it in every pharma aspect where clinical trials move faster, the data moves faster, the sharing of ideas move faster. But to Jeana's point, it's got to be simple, right? You have to have this pathway. So whether it's a consumer side or whether it's in a business to business relationship, you have to have this pathway of a clean, simple connectivity with your customer. And, I think the cloud's going to continue to enable that. And as Marc said a moment ago, it's just going to get faster. And I certainly see that happening every day in the life sciences sector.
Absolutely. First is the audience is in for a treat with all three of you, because I think the mind is just going to explode because I got to spend time with them. So I'm going to facilitate the conversation. And anytime you have questions, please put it in the chat so we can moderate it. Okay. So I want to start with just defining what the cloud business innovation really means. And what does it mean in $1 trillion market? And why should we all care? Why should women care, especially in this market? So Jeana, I'll start with you.
Yeah, a couple things. I think people typically think of innovation as technology innovation, and they forget all the most important parts of running a business, which is business model, support, sales. It's all the peripheral functions that are required to make technology great. And so we talk so much about technology and innovation in cloud. And so the thing that's super, super important about sort of where cloud is evolving, it's important to remember where we came from, right? When we talked about cloud originally, people didn't have to change their sales force, their channel ecosystem, their business model, how they sell, how they actually compensated their sellers. They just put something in the cloud and then called it cloud, and it still walked and looked and smelled just like an old business, right? But it was cloud, right? And so you could check the box on an RFP that you had a cloud service. And it didn't adapt to the way in which people had expectations around cloud. And I remember when I first started working in M&A it was like 18 years ago. And there was this early adoption of how services were evolving and what it really meant and what services really meant, like cloud services really meant. And it was fascinating because still to this day, companies don't get it, that in a world where you can get instant gratification in technology, you've got to evolve all the parts and components with it. And you have to over-index in areas like support. You have to over-index. And if you can self-serve online and get something, you actually want to be able to self-serve in terms of support, but you actually don't want to self-serve online. You actually want to talk to a human. So you've got in a cloud-based business model, when you have recurring revenue, where you get to cut back in either the way in which your cost of sales, you got to over index in things like support. You got to over index on things that in your previous models you didn't have to pay as much attention to. And so it's fascinating to me, and sort of like as we think about how this model is evolving and the importance of what it means to be like, what is cloud business model innovation? It really is, are you adapting the whole unit of your company to become this thing that works together and not actually against each other in reality, right? So you've got to make sure all the parts of your business, from business model through to technology, are all working in conjunction with one another. And that is if you go back to cloud fundamentals on so many businesses today, people haven't evolved their value prop. They haven't evolved the way in which they sell. They haven't evolved anything. And so it's really fascinating to see where people expect cloud to be really successful and accelerate a business, but they forgot all the business fundamentals, right? And so I think that's the importance of that business, is it's recurring and people love that. You can sort of set it and forget it in many ways and don't have to worry about renewals in this new model. But there's a whole bunch of things that you need to look out for that you didn't have to look out for as much in an old enterprise sales world.
So well said. And I think, Jeana, it also reflects, because people have to over-index, the number of jobs that are getting created, which is non-technical jobs, is also increasing, right? You need all these opportunities for people to come in and deploy these solutions. So Stephen, do you have anything to add to this discussion? How do you define the cloud business innovation?
Yeah, I think certainly you look at the kind of tools that individuals are used to. We're all used to email up in the cloud now, and Word and Excel and all these programs that are available up in the cloud. But for me, in the life sciences sector, I think the big shift has been the kind of compute that you can do to do genomic analysis in the cloud now. That used to require lots of hardware and was almost so capital intensive that it just ruled small companies out. But I'm seeing small biotech companies that have interesting ideas in genomic analysis, and they're able to go and spin up these services up in the cloud. And so it's really, I think this space has really kind of moved to allowing smaller businesses that are more in the startup sector, 5, 10 individuals that have a great idea that can work hard and actually have the same tools and capabilities that larger pharma and larger biotech companies have access to. So, but yet at the same time, to Jeana's point, you have to make sure your business processes flow, right? And that, all the basic building blocks are still there on that.
Awesome. Marc, any perspective to add here?
I mean, just to put a bow on, those are both perfect comments. I think what I'm realizing increasingly is that the barriers to entry from a technology perspective are going down. And so to be an entrepreneur doesn't require what it might have in the past. Just to Stephen's point around doing genomic analysis, you'd have to go spin up a data farm and it would cost you zillions of dollars. Today, you could go buy that from a cloud computing hyperscaler. That gives you that ability. This democratization of everyone has access to enterprise quality tools. Everybody can spin up a video meeting. Everybody can go spin up some elastic compute. Everybody can do data visualization. And increasingly, there's investment there that maybe wasn't in the past. And so I think the model lends itself to next level innovation because the barriers are lower. That doesn't mean the work isn't hard and the innovation isn't hard, but some of the barriers are lower. And then I would say for the investors thinking about investing in these companies, they, as Jeana pointed out, they love subscription. They love subscriptions because it's a predictable revenue stream. Investors love predictable growth. They also love the ability to scale. And the other great thing about cloud business models is they give you this ubiquitous potential reach to get to volume. Maybe your initial business plan was you were going to go to market in the US, and then one of your customers says, I need you tomorrow in South Africa. In the past, that would have been almost impossible. But today you go to your hyperscaler and say, turn on a computing environment for me in South Africa. They're ready to go. And that is very unique in terms of an entrepreneur's ability to pivot, leveraging the power and the value of this cloud model.
Well said. So all of you talked about predictable revenue. So I want to touch on the recurring revenue has become the leading business model What is that about this model that all the companies are adopting as the core business model? I've started to see, like as of last year, all the companies are investing more in putting these business models, which are more recurring, from automobiles to healthcare to name it. Everyone has it. Jeana, do you want to put some perspectives here?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things to think about. Recurring revenue is one thing, and I think people get wrapped around the axle that a monthly recurring revenue stream is the only option that they can go with in the cloud business model. And there's tons of different ways to measure a unit of consumption, right? And so it doesn't have to be necessarily per user. It's for whatever unit of measure is right for your business. And I think entrepreneurs get pressured into some monthly recurring revenue stream because that's the right business model for the masses. But I think everyone has to sort of look at recurring revenue streams are amazing, right? They're evergreen, which means they never expire and you have to opt out to end them. They're amazing. You don't have this high pressure renewal cycle at the end of a year or 3-year commitment, right? And so they're amazing for that, but you don't have to get stuck in one business model. And I think that's a really important misconception that's happening in the market right now. Incredibly smart business model, and it's something to look at, but also be really leery of, is that the right thing for your business? Because everybody has different units of measure that matter, right? Some are a bundled SKU, some are, I remember I was talking to somebody and they wanted to measure per unit of automobile that they had created, not per hour or per user or per purchaser. And so it was super interesting. These units of measure really varied, but they felt pressure because everyone else was doing it on a per user subscription and it just didn't work for their business. So while super important, I think it's important for you all as entrepreneurs and business owners to be thinking about, it's not only one business model that we talk about, even though monthly recurring revenue tends to, they can be, you can still have a monthly recurring revenue, but it's an annual prepay up front, or it's 3-year prepay in advance. But you can get super creative with these business models. And I think the most important thing, like why it's so important, is it's a less hassle for business owners, right? It's predictable revenue streams. But I would just caution everyone that you don't have to fall into the prey of per month, per user, consistent payment at a lump sum. You can be super creative here. And there's a great book called The Business Model Canvas that helps people think through their business design and what it should look like. But always think about what's important for your business and how you make money and how you want to make money.
Yeah, and Jeana, during the accelerator we have like 8 pricing models that they have to go through and pick the right model so they can put it in the canvas and then validate in the market to make sure, do we have the right product mix, like, the market fit. And it's pretty fascinating to see the time they start with what pricing they should be thinking. Then by the time they come out of the accelerator, it's completely a different pricing model, right?
Yeah.
So, but the recurring model is definitely the way to go. Marc, do you want to add some insights in here?
I think Jeana's right. I mean, I think right now the nice thing is to innovate and try things. I think perfection is the enemy of good at this stage. I think you want to meet your customer where they are with a decision that they're ready to make that day. That might be a trial, that might be pay-go, that might be consumption, it might be something else. I think that's the other great thing about these platforms, is they give you the agility to innovate based upon what your customer is interested in. I think that investors do like annual recurring revenue, but what they really like is predictable growth. And so if you can show them predictable growth with a different business model, that's really what they want to invest in. We use ARR as a proxy for a multiplier when someone's getting private equity investment or whatever. But the reality is they're just looking for, can you show me how your business is going to grow? And does that math model make sense? And then just to add one more layer onto that, I think the other great thing is in these environments, that user experience will also tell you where you might be able to monetize a relationship. To Jeana's point, you may decide that in product, there may be some ability to do upsell and cross-sell. And if you were locked into just ARR, but your product is interacting with the customer, you may have missed an opportunity to monetize something further down the stream. So I think that is really important, that tying the product, the service, and the experience all together in your economic value chain is so instrumental. It doesn't have to be one or the other end of the line. It just has to be clear for the customer.
Yeah, and this is a topic, Jeana, Marc, Stephen, I can sit for hours and listen to you, right? for interest of time, I kind of keep moving forward. So Stephen, this is for you, is as you're looking at these transformation, the industries, which industries are adopting these models, business model, and what factors are forcing them to adopt? You have to unmute. Yeah, there.
Yeah, working on it. So yeah, I think in terms of industries that I'm seeing adopt the models, my world is really kind of in that life sciences industry. So I think Jeana and Marc probably have a lot more exposure than I do on those models. But pick up on Marc's previous point and Jeana's point about it's all about kind of how you measure things. And so in the life sciences space, it's how do we measure positive impact on patient lives, right? And how do we help individuals have a healthier life? And so, our measurement tools are very different than kind of revenue models or revenue recognition models. So, but maybe Jeana and Marc could pick up on where they see some of the recurring revenue showing up for other.
Sure, Jeana. Do you have anything to add to this one?
Yeah, it's really different having worked at like two of the big hyperscalers, right? It's fascinating to see where the traction was. And you saw in every single industry, early adopters adopting new cloud business models. And then you had your laggards, and there were laggards in the big enterprise. There were even laggards down in the startup space who came from traditional companies. And so it's really fascinating to see the evolution of how companies of all different sizes, right, evolve. So like, for instance, like in Google, we've got a lot of traction in the telco space and a lot of traction in the financial services space and a lot of really creative business models coming up in those spaces. At Microsoft, we saw a ton of traction in manufacturing and a ton, so there's just different industries and different businesses. And I think the thing that's probably the most interesting is every single company is becoming a tech company. If I'm making bracelets out of my basement and I want to go, I'm used to sell at the farmer's market, but I want to sell online now and I'm using Etsy or another online service, I'm now a tech company. I've got to figure out. And so that goes across every single industry, and thinking about how you leverage technology, not just to like say you're a tech company, but really leveraging it from all the way from how do I produce and run my operations in my business, to how do I provide a better customer experience, to how do I manage DEI for my company, right? How all of these things, figuring out how to really leverage technology, but not let it grab hold of you to where you're stifled in constant iteration. And you know what I mean? And so every industry handles it differently. And it's fascinating to see the traction across different companies and across different startups. And it really honestly depends on the market you're in and how freely you feel to innovate and how freely the customer base is willing to let you innovate. Because like I said, you mentioned, right, there's 10 different business models, hundreds of different business models and different units of measure on a monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue. But if that base in that industry, like financial services, customers kind of expect a certain model. If I go in with a completely orthogonal model to what they're used to, I'm not going to get any traction either. And I can be as creative as I want, or think my business only makes revenue in this way. So you have to take into consideration the way customers are willing and interested in buying versus where you see the trends going. But like I said, we saw even the most conservative businesses picking up the recurring revenue model because they saw it as a way to either improve the customer experience or provide greater monetization. And it's really those that actually think about it holistically across their whole business are the ones that are gaining the most traction from what I've seen.
No, well said, well said. So we'll go into a rapid fire now. So we'll talk about the gotchas and the best practices. So Marc, I will start with you. What are some of the gotchas businesses need to look out when considering this particular business model, especially the recurring business model?
Yeah, I think I said it earlier, but and some people may disagree with me, but I would say in this place, when you're trying to do innovation and meet the customer where they are today, I think perfect is the enemy of good. You want to try and do pilots, do tests, do initiatives, listen to your customer. I think the worst thing you can do is spend a year on your strategy and take it to market and have it be a bust. And so much like cloud services, where you're dropping features every week or month or day, the same is true from business model innovation. The customer will help you get clarity on the right model for them based upon the value that you're providing. We have a tendency, and especially for technologists, that we want to solve every problem with technology. That doesn't have to be the case, especially at the beginning. Simplify, build a process, even if it's manual, then automate. If you lock yourself into automation too early, then you've made a decision that you maybe can't unravel later on. And that can be challenging. And so be more agile when you think about the way you want to build your processes, particularly because you're iterating on the business model. And then the last one, and this is to me, the most important piece in this whole equation, is your people need to understand why. Not the how, not the what. They get that. They're brilliant. But the why. Why are we doing this? Why do I need to change? And why do I need to pivot? And why do I need to be agile? And where I see companies fail is when they don't make sure that their people understand the connection between what they're doing today and where they're going.
Thank you, Marc. That was great. I love it. Pilots, agile, and why. Jeana, what about you?
Three things for me when I think about sort of the things to think about. One, to Marc's point around simple versus complexity. When you grow your feature set, people tend to just make incremental SKUs. And then all of a sudden you have this sort of universal catalog of a billion different SKUs that people are having to wade through, always thinking about how do you simplify those bundles and how do you make sure that the right bundle is for the right audience. It's really easy to grow up and just have an explosive catalog that's so confusing for folks. The second thing is balancing. This is one that every company tries to get right, is balancing the premium features and functionality or offers that you have in your base offer to attract a whole bunch of net new customers versus only monetizing the most premium features. And what I mean by that is if you offer a base free SKU and you want to seed it and give it to everyone, if it doesn't have some really compelling components in it, you're not going to get anybody to ever upsell because they're not going to know how great those potential features are. So being really critically assessing what you can put in that sort of freemium or low end offer that gives people a taste of what exceptional things they're going to have when they start to pay you more money is super important. You certainly don't want to put all the premium features down in the lowest and cheapest SKU, but you also sort of want to think about how do you balance that a little bit more effectively to get people really excited. And I think that the third and final thing I'll leave everyone, and I said it earlier, but I can't say it enough because I feel like every place I go forgets this, is starting with the basics and going through and starting with a business design session. Before you build any business model, before you do anything, make sure you and your board and your other leaders in your organization are all in alignment on what you're building and why you're building it. Are you going after a net new revenue stream, or are you protecting an existing base that you have? Are you going into one region or going into multiple regions? So often, and I've sat through a million executive briefing meetings with customers where you get all the CEO in the meeting with all the other CXOs, and you ask them, okay, so what are you trying to do with this service? Where are you trying to go? And at the same time, they're all saying the exact opposite things. And they realize, holy cow, we started because we hadn't aligned on assumptions. We hadn't aligned on our core goals, and it's literally just going back to basics. And it's hard for companies to do that, and it's hard for smart people to do that. It's hard for anybody in a new business to do that. Like, just start with the basic fundamentals and then work your way up, because that's the thing that will sort of trip you up as you go along. Because thinking about where you're saving money is important, but if you're not on the same page about how you're approaching it, and to Marc's point too about the context of why you're doing it, you often find very frenetic, crazy business models and lots of resets and refactoring that slows your overall growth of the business.
Awesome. Stephen, what about you? Any gotchas or best practices you want to share?
So I completely agree with Marc and Jeana's commentary, and having alignment on the core goals from a business operations standpoint is just critical. I think the other part is the simplification, not only of what you're presenting to the customer in terms of the product from a revenue standpoint, but also simplification of processes internally to make your own organization flow and run well. Oftentimes you're thinking so much about what's going on with the customer, but what about your own internal customers that you have to support and provide operations to on the finance side or IT side or sales side, right? So, and then I guess the last thing that often gets overlooked is especially around business operations, is just understanding the security side. Making sure you're doing all the right things to keep your business operations secure, because there's nothing worse than walking in and having your business locked out, and then you can't even get to your customers. So those are kind of my big things.
First is absolutely amazing insight. Do you all agree with it? First, give me some kind of major emojis or reactions on the chat. Did you learn something? Were there any takeaways from the speakers today? There you go. See, look at the love they have for you. So here is what I learned from each one of you. Really focus on predictable growth and look at the revenue models and the business models to provide that particular growth. And really focus on your basics, drive alignment with your team from board to everyone in the journey. Focus a lot on pilots. Don't try to build automation before you really go and innovate with customer. And focus on simplicity on how you help customers to use your software. Did I get it right? Jeana, Marc, Stephen?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think you nailed it. I'd just leave with one other additional piece of advice for entrepreneurs and for professionals everywhere. Take care of yourself. That you protect the asset. You are the asset. You're there. And if you're not good, your people aren't going to be good. So take care of yourself so you can take care of others.
Very well said, Marc. Jeana, any final remarks?
One quick thing, in cloud is such a hyper accelerant for businesses that as an entrepreneur, you're always going, I want to be the next Facebook, or I want to be the next whomever, or I want to be the next mega giant. And I think the one thing for entrepreneurs to always remember is the basics of business is still super important. Nail a niche. Get really good at doing that. Cloud lets you jump into, go from 0 to 60. And that's a lot of times where you get tripped up, is if you get so excited about this massive opportunity, but you haven't done the basics of nailing that niche. And I'd say don't lose that business rigor and discipline you have on running a business just because cloud can get you somewhere so much faster. And that's the one thing I would just, keep being excited about it, but try to be disciplined in your approach so you can really attract the right customer base to get traction.
Absolutely. And Stephen, any final remarks?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they've said it all, which is staying focused and taking care of yourself and your team to make sure you can continue to thrive as a healthy business.
Thank you. First is fantastic conversation. I learned a lot, and I think I'm going to put as a blog post after this one, because I personally learned is looking at me as an entrepreneur. I'm like, yeah, there's so many things I need to get it right. So thank you for reminding, going back to basics. Again, thank you for being at the Women in Cloud Summit. And for all of you, they are accessible. You can request a warm introduction. They are generous in their time in helping you really get to the next level. Again, thank you all for being here. And I'm going to hand over the baton to Patty. And I will be facilitating a couple of sessions too. So you'll see a lot of me today. Okay, so bear with that.